Today, the topic of the talk is the 5 hindrances in meditation and in daily life. As you can see here, the 5 hindrances are illustrated. It starts off with ill will on the left, but actually this is not the normal order. But anyway, there's ill will, there's sensory desire, restlessness and worry, doubt, and finally sloth and torpor. I'm sure that many of you associate the 5 hindrances with the practice of meditation. These are the obstacles you encounter in the course of a meditation. However, the 5 hindrances have also to be dealt with in one's daily life, and this was not disregarded by the Buddha. There is, in fact, at least one sutta where the Buddha talked about how important being able to overcome the 5 hindrances is in order for worldly success. So this comes from the Āvarana Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fives, Sutta number 51. There's one of the suttas where the Buddha talked about the 5 hindrances as weakness of wisdom. And so let's see what the Buddha said in this sutta. Because without having abandoned these 5 obstructions, hindrances, encumbrances of the mind, states that weakened wisdom, it is impossible that a bhikkhu with his powerless and feeble wisdom might know his own good, the good of others, or the good of both, or realize the superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. We can see from the last part of the sentence, realize the superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. You can see that this refers to the practice of meditation. Whereas the earlier part, know his own good, the good of others, or the good of both, this could apply to both worldly as well as spiritual good. But since the title of today's topic is the 5 hindrances in meditation and in life, I will start off with meditation and then come back to how the 5 hindrances have to be overcome in daily life. So there's one particular sutta called the Āhāra Sutta. Āhāra is food or nutrition. It's found in the Samyutta Nikaya 46.51, where the Buddha talked about how to nourish and denourish the hindrances. Let's go to the hindrances one by one first. The first one is sensual desire, the second is ill will, the third is sloth and torpor, the fourth is restlessness and worry, and finally there's doubt. This is the normal sequence that the 5 hindrances are arranged. Sensual desire in the context of meditation refers to any sort of desire that is connected with pleasures of the senses. It could be longing for a certain type of food. It could be something visual, like you miss your favorite YouTube video. Or it could be something auditory, miss your favorite song, or whatever, anything that is connected with the body. Body in terms of the 5 senses. It could also mean yearning for physical comfort, especially when you're on retreat in a retreat center. And since you have to sleep with a lot of people in a dormitory, that will have some effect on the quality of the sleep, because people snore and people move around in their beds, or they get up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night, and then this wakes you up and you feel you don't have a good continuous sleep, so the next day that will affect your meditation. Of course, that will bring about sloth and torpor as well, but there is a yearning, perhaps sometimes when you're having this sloth and torpor, to have the comfort of sleeping in a proper place where you can get good sleep. So that is sensual desire. Any thoughts about pleasures of the senses connected with the five senses. Ill will is ill will towards others, towards yourself, towards the situation. That could be something sometimes quite self-inflicted, in the sense that you are angry with yourself for not performing according to your expectations. For example, you might feel upset when people talk around you, when they're supposed to maintain noble silence, and so forth. A lot of these things go on in our minds in the course of our meditation. You will, in whatever way, towards yourself, towards other people, towards the situation, towards the teaching, whatever. Sloth and torpor refers to drowsiness, refers also to laziness. Sometimes when the mind becomes sluggish and doesn't want to work, doesn't want to be mindful of things happening, that is sloth and torpor. It's actually a mental state, but it can also be manifested in your body in terms of physical discomfort and weakness. The fourth is restlessness and worry. Restlessness in the sense of the mind just going everywhere, wandering everywhere, here and there, not having any theme in particular, just jumping from one object to another, one subject to another. And worry, of course, is feeling remorseful for what you had not done but should have done, or what you did which you shouldn't have done. Right? So this is remorse. And especially in the course of meditation, when your mind quietens down and you have not been impeccable in your precepts, that's when all your misdeeds will surface in you, and you might have to deal with a lot of remorse. Right? So that's why trying to keep the precepts is important, not only when you are on retreat, but even in your daily life, because that will affect the quality of your meditation in a retreat. If you had not kept the precepts well, and when your mind is quietened down, then all the misdeeds will surface. And since vipassanā, or the practice of insight, is for liberation from samsara, oftentimes you will have to pay for it in terms of your mental suffering or even physical suffering in various forms. Finally, there's doubt. There could be doubt about the teacher, doubt about the method, doubt about your own capability, doubt about the place that you are doing the retreat or meditating, and doubt about anything in relation to the practice. There is something which makes you feel daunted, not willing to continue because of all these weaknesses or defects in your environment or within yourself. Right, so in brief, these are what the five hindrances are. So let's see how these five hindrances are nourished. It is nourished by the sign of beauty. Beauty does not necessarily refer only to something visible, although we use the word beauty in that sense, because the sensual desire is connected with all the five senses. So anything that is desirable and pleasant through the senses, that sign of it, that idea of it, that memory of it, is what nourishes that sensual desire. So it's yearning for this thing that you had experienced, this desirable, pleasant experience that you had experienced in the past, that will stoke sensual desire and make it even more intense. And for ill will, there is a sign of resistance. Ill will happens when you are not contented with what is. Whether it's your own performance, whether it's your environment, people around you, people's behavior, not living up to your standards. All these are signs of resistance. You are resisting what is happening. You are resisting reality. And you are, in fact, expecting others to behave otherwise, or expecting the situation to be other than what it is. So this is the resistance. So when there is this resistance, of course, that will also stoke ill will and make it worse and worse. Sloth and torpor. Nourishment for sloth and torpor is discontent, which is boredom. Another way of saying you are bored. You have been living a life of a lot of stimulation through the senses, watching videos, advertisements, having intellectual stimulation through thinking out things, debate, discussion. These are all various forms of stimulation through all the six senses. And when you don't get them, particularly when you're on retreat, you're supposed to be restrained, you don't read, you don't talk to people. So you're starved of all this stimulation and you get bored. And because of that boredom, there's discontent. You're discontented with the situation, and maybe you might even regret and wonder why you had signed up on this retreat and wasting your time when you could be doing something more useful and beneficial. So this will lead to sloth and torpor, because you're bored, you're not interested in what you're doing, keeping track of what's happening with your senses. Instead of touch and go, you want to indulge in all those thoughts and memories. So there is discontent and boredom. And that saps a lot of energy. The mind saps more energy than the body. So when you think too much and you try to fight with your thoughts too much, that will also lead to lethargy. Your mind becomes tired, and that will also manifest in the lethargy of the body. Restlessness and worry is having the sense of unsettledness. You have not settled your affairs before you checked in for the retreat. So usually for the first few days of a normal sit-walk retreat, there will be a lot of baggage from the past. All those things that you have left half-finished or undone, not properly closed. So these things will arise in your mind, and that is the cause for restlessness. And of course, worry, because of the things that you should have done but did not do, and so forth. So this is because you haven't settled your business when you come in. Right? This is unsettledness of the mind. So if your mind is unsettled and you check into a retreat, then there will be a lot of restlessness and worry. And what is nourishment for doubt? It is about doubtful things. Things that you doubt about your own capability, about suitability of the teacher or the method, about the retreat center, or whatever. Yeah. So these are the things that you doubt, and because of that, this gives rise to doubt. So then how do we denourish these? So the sign of beauty, then it is the sign of non-beauty. For instance, visually, if you see something beautiful and that evokes desire in you, then the classic approach is to try to practice asubha, or the practice of non-beauty, of reflecting on the loathsomeness of the body, of yourself, and of others. So sometimes this is done by dissecting our body into the 31 or 32 parts and looking at them in terms of their loathsome nature. Sometimes it is done by recollecting what you had seen in a life autopsy, in the charnel ground, in the cemetery, or some gruesome accident in the middle of the road. So you try to recollect all these things to give you a sense of loathsomeness in regard to the body. That's from the visual point of view. So you have to apply that also to the other senses. Instead of looking at the desirable and pleasant aspects of these sense objects, you try to change it into the non-desirable, non-pleasant perceptions of these sense objects. Ill will, the antidote for ill will is mettā, to do loving kindness. It's not easy to do loving kindness on someone whom you dislike. But if you had been doing loving kindness meditation before, it helps to rewire your brain. For sloth and torpor, you have to put in more effort. Like I teach you, point and shoot, hit and run, especially when you are sleepy. Then you have to put in more effort to look at objects and move from one object to another quickly. Right? So there are also many other ways of doing that we shall come to later. This sutta is very concise. It's just giving you the main point without any elaborations. The nourishment of restlessness and worry is by having peace of mind. In my teachings on open mindfulness, I give you this formula of other anchor. And the first one is to actually have the right attitude of accepting whatever happens, and without following what you like or rejecting what you dislike or ignoring whatever you neither like nor dislike. So this will give you peace of mind because you're willing to accept. Instead of worrying about all these things, instead of trying to fight with your restlessness, you just accept, let them come and go. They will eventually fade away. If you try to fight with them, that will aggravate the situation and cause even more restlessness. And for doubt, then you are supposed to have frequent attention to wholesomeness, which means to say you have to understand what is the wholesome and what is unwholesome. And then when doubts arise, then you have to focus on what is wholesome. Wholesome means anything that is related or that is motivated by non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. So in Āhāra Sutta, the instructions given by the Buddha are very brief. And so we have to look at other texts in order to get more inspiration on how we can deal with these 5 hindrances. So now let's look at the commentary. This is the commentary to the Satipatthana Sutta. That because in the Satipatthana Sutta there is one particular section in Dhammanupassana, contemplation of the Dhammas, or repeated observation of the Dhammas. And the first exercise is to observe and understand the 5 hindrances. You're supposed to understand how these 5 hindrances arise, and you're supposed to also understand how you can abandon them once they've arisen, and finally, how once they have been abandoned, they will not arise again. So that is found in the 4th establishment of mindfulness, Dhammanupassana. So this is the commentary to that, and it gives the whole list of conditions for the prevention of sensual desire. So the first one is to learn Asubha meditation. Like I said just now, you could learn Asubha in terms of the 31 parts of the body, or 32 parts of the body, or you could learn it in terms of the charnel ground contemplations, recollecting the sight of corpses in various stages of decay. And if you have not personally witnessed these corpses in their actual presence, then you could just use your imagination, and perhaps you would have watched videos before and tried to recollect these videos of all these corpses in their various forms of decay. So learning Asubha meditation itself can help you to prevent sensual desire from arising. And not to say practicing the Asubha meditation itself. When you practice the Asubha meditation itself, then you can be more adept in preventing sensual desire from arising. It seems there's a commentary story of a monk who was practicing this Asubha meditation, and his primary object was bones, a skeleton of bones. And so one day he was going on arms round, or he was walking along the road, and then he met a woman running past him. And then later he saw a man coming from behind, and he asked the monk whether he had seen a woman running past. And the monk said, "Woman or not, I only saw a pack of bones. I only saw, the skeleton running." So this monk had practiced Asubha meditation to such an extent that he is able to replace what the eye can normally see with what the mind has created. So the mind has created this perception that the human body is actually bones, skeleton only. And so instead of allowing the eyes to form the picture, his mental perception was stronger than what the eye could perceive. So he sort of overrode what the eye perceived with the perception that the mind had developed. Well, another way of prevention of sensual desire is to guard the sense doors. So if you know that you are prone to sensual desire, then you should try to avoid getting into contact with those things like lewd photos or blue films, and advertisements that make you sexually or sensually aroused. You should try to avoid that. And so that's why in the old days it was easier for monks to practice, because we didn't have all this social media, no newspapers, so they also stayed in the forest away from people. But it is something which has not been uprooted. If they may stay in the forest for a long time and they might get a lot of serenity, but that latent tendency is still within them. And so when they come for Pindabat, arms round in the mornings, and then they come across scantily dressed pretty girl or woman giving alms, that could also arouse their sensual desire. So guarding the door to the senses is important, and it was easier in the past, but now it's not so easy because of exposure to social media and all these photos that are inappropriate for monks. So it is no surprise that since the introduction of smartphones and the availability of internet in traditional Buddhist countries like Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Burma, many monks have disrobed because they could not contain their sensual desire due to exposure to all this social media. The fourth is moderation in eating. So if you eat a lot, then you tend to get sleepy, and then you sleep. And you sleep a lot, then that also tends to make your sensual desires more acute. The next one is good spiritual friendship. Having Kalyana Mittas who talk about things that are connected to Dhamma practice, things that are connected to sense restraint, to moderation in eating, and so forth. So, as we all know, we are products of our environment. If we are powerful enough, we influence others. If we are not so powerful, others will influence us. So it is important for you to keep good company. That's why in the Mangala Sutta, the first two blessings are to avoid association with fools and to associate with wise people. Wise people here means people who are on the path. And sixth, of course, is suitable conversation, which you will get by associating with Kalyana Mitras. Alright, so these 5 and 6 are common to all the conditions for the prevention of the various types of 5 hindrances. So this applies to all the other 4 hindrances as well. So in effect, actually there are only about 3 or 4 that are special to each hindrance. For ill will, the first is to learn mettā. The second is to actually practice mettā. As I pointed out just now, somebody who is by nature bad-tempered or hot-tempered has a tendency to look at the bad side of things, the defects of things. But mettā is different. Mettā is when you try to look at the good side of things, the positive aspects of how people can be well and happy. As I said, this will rewire your mind so that if you're a hot-tempered person, the practice of mettā will sort of subdue your innate tendency to be hot-tempered. It will sort of tone you down and you become more mellow. That will happen when you do more mettā. So if you are that sort of person and you do a lot of mettā, that will prevent the frequency of the arising of anger towards yourself, others, or towards situations. It may still arise, but you may reduce the frequency of how they arise and perhaps also the intensity of these outbursts. The third is to reflect on your karmic ownership, which is, for example, if you have disagreement with somebody that causes a lot of upset in you, within yourself, then you could reflect on the ownership of karma. Whatever that person does is that person will reap if you perceive him to be in the wrong. Or you could also look at it in terms of your karmic connections. Maybe you had done something like that to him or her in the past, and now it's time for you to repay that without creating more bad karma for the future. And this is also much wise consideration, which is yoniso manasikara. You could consider in terms of cause, condition, and effect that this person is a product of his upbringing, of his past conditioning, and he also maybe is not cultivated enough to be able to control himself. Or you could also consider yourself as not matured enough to be able to respond positively to this person's assault, mentally, emotionally, or otherwise. And of course, 5 and 6, good spiritual friendship and suitable conversation. Now, this comes from the sutta. Previous set came from the commentary, and this comes from the sutta. So when you see a green background, it means that this comes from the sutta. So this comes from Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 5, Sutta number 161, which talks about how to remove ill will. Right? The standard practice, develop mettā for that person. This can only happen if you have already got a good foundation of mettā. If you remember, the traditional sequence of doing mettā is to first do it to yourself, and then to somebody whom you respect and are grateful to, then to someone whom you love, then to a mediocre person, someone in the middle, and finally only to an enemy. So if you have not developed mettā properly, strong enough, it's very difficult to do it to somebody who has offended you. You could, instead of developing mettā, you could develop compassion for that person. Yeah, this poor person is reacting because he hasn't got enough control over his mind. He's a product of his past conditioning. This poor fellow will have to reap his karmic consequences in the future. So you can have compassion for him. You can also develop equanimity in the sense of, well, whatever he does, that's his business, and I don't have to react. Let him suffer for himself. So that's a form of equanimity. Just accepting it, like I said earlier in the other anchor formula I gave you, accept all things, whatever comes, good, bad, or neutral, just accept them as products of causes and conditions. Fourthly, you could just forget that person, don't think about it. Change the subject, go and do something that you are interested in so that this person doesn't come into your mind. Because sometimes you're so angered and so incensed by a person's behavior that it's very strange. The mind keeps on nagging and clinging on to that idea that this person had done wrong and how you would get your own back on him or her. That's how clinging works, you know. People think that we only cling to pleasant objects. Very strange. We even cling to unpleasant objects. So if it's so strong, so obsessive, then you want to forget the person, you must do something which interests you. And usually it's something more physical. Something more physical that interests you, for example, gardening, or you go to the gym to work it out, play a game, go swimming, go hiking, whatever, you know, something to distract your attention from that person. That's how you can remove ill will. And then you have also finally resolve on karmic ownership again, saying that he will have to reap the karma that he had sowed from on his part. And you could also look on it in terms of your karmic relationship, something that a karmic debt that you have to pay to that person, and so forth. Okay, this is from the sutta. And now we go back to conditions for the prevention of sloth and torpor from the commentary to the Satipatthana Sutta. This is about sloth and torpor. First one is grasping the sign of overeating, which means to say, particularly when you go on a retreat, it's a new lifestyle for you because you have been used to eating maybe 2, 3, or 4 times a day. And then when you go for a retreat, you only eat one morning breakfast and a lunch, and after that, no more meals. So sometimes the first few days, there's always some inaccuracies in estimating how much you should take. If you take too much, then you'll become sleepy. If you take too little, then after your meal, you feel very fresh and alert, but towards the end of the day or early in the morning, then you will feel sapped of energy. So it will take some time for you to adjust yourself to the new lifestyle. Well, another way is to change postures. You sit and then you feel drowsy, then you stand. Right? You stand and you still feel drowsy, then you walk. Right? If you walk and you're still drowsy, then walk faster. And if you walk faster and you're still drowsy, go take a nap. Thirdly is to pay attention to the perception of light. Yeah, because, you know, when you try to sleep at night and the lights are on, you find that usually you can't sleep. Yeah, it keeps you awake. So in the same way, if you have a tendency to be sleepy, don't sit in a dark place. Sit in a place where there is light. And better still, open your eyes. Yeah, staying outdoors is another way, because if you stay in an aircon room or you stay under a mosquito net, the air becomes very stuffy and the oxygen level also decreases, and therefore it makes you even more sleepy. So if you stay outdoors, then there's always fresh air, especially under the shade. Then the last, of course, 5 and 6, common to all, good spiritual friendship and suitable conversation. Now we come to the sutta. This one is an interesting sutta that was given by the Buddha to Āisma Moggallana. As you know, Āisma Moggallana is foremost among the Buddha's disciples in terms of psychic abilities. He became a Sotapan by listening to a short verse that was uttered by Āisma Sariputta, his good friend. But after that, he had to go on intensive meditation for about 1 week before he became an arahant. So during that period of 1 week, it seems, he was nodding away in his place of meditation. At that time, the Buddha was somewhere else, but the Buddha could perceive with his psychic powers that Moggallana was in trouble. And so the Buddha appeared in front of Moggallana and gave him some advice. First, it says, change the object. Whatever object that you were focusing on before you became drowsy, then don't use that object. change to something else. So in the case of my teaching of open mindfulness, the default teaching is open your eyes and maintain a defocused gaze, right? But if you are sleepy, you can't afford to maintain a defocused gaze. You focus instead on certain objects, but you don't stay there. You change your object quickly from one to another, preferably from one sense door to another. Okay, so another way is you could ponder, examine, and mentally inspect the Dhamma that you had learned. Because that's intellectual stimulation, and this is particularly useful for intellectuals who can become very wakeful when they start to think about things. You know, there are some people who find it so boring to watch the rising and falling, or to watch the breath breathing in and breathing out, because it's a single object. Yeah, but if you ask them to do open mindfulness, open your eyes and keep track of things going around in the senses, keep track of what's happening to the mind, they become very alive. Yeah, so it depends on the temperament of the person. So if you are that sort of person who doesn't like to stay put on one single object, then you could do this one, to ponder, examine, and mentally inspect the Dhamma. This is not about open mindfulness. This is about actually recollecting the Dhamma that you had learned and trying to ponder, examine, and mentally understand this Dhamma in terms of how it can be put into practice. After all, we learn the Dhamma not in order to pass examinations, to get certificates, but in order to find out various means of practicing that is suitable for us. As you know, the Buddha tailored his talks to his audience. And so a particular sutta may not really be relevant for you, but some other suttas may. So therefore, if you read widely, then you could come across a sutta that fits you particularly. Yeah, so this is what is meant. You ponder, examine, and mentally inspect the Dhamma. This is for people who are not looking at books, you are meditating and then you get sleepy, and this is what you could mentally do. Alternatively, you could recite the Dhamma in detail. In the past, of course, we don't have books, so we recite the Dhamma. Reciting the Dhamma is also one way of getting composed, getting samadhi. So you recite the Dhamma either mentally or verbally, depending on your situation. If that doesn't work, then pull your ears, rub your limbs to circulate your blood. And if that doesn't work, get up, wash your eyes, look around, look up in the sky at the stars and constellation at night, or at the moon. And also you can attend to perception of light. Now this is what we have dealt with earlier also. Not only to actually go to a lighted area, but even if you're in darkness, then you try to imagine light within yourself, in your mind's eye, and to expand the light to brighten up your mind. So if all of this doesn't work, get up and walk back and forth, looking ahead, but restrained. Yeah, not getting caught up in thoughts about what you see, but opening your eyes to know where you are going so that you won't get into an accident. And finally, if all these don't work, then go take a nap with an intention to get up when it's enough. Actually, the body is very intelligent. You can actually program the body. You're so sleepy, you've tried all these methods, they don't work, then you can tell the body, okay, you need a rest. So you lie down on your right side, and with your legs, one foot on top of the other foot, and then you just tell your mind, okay, take a nap, and when you've had enough, then get up. It could also be a power nap, it could just be 20 minutes or 10 minutes, and when you get up, you're very refreshed. It's better than nodding away for half an hour and not getting out of it. Okay, so now we come to restlessness and worry. What does the commentary say? First is being learned or knowledgeable. This refers actually to the practitioner, whether you're a monk or layperson, knowledgeable or learned in respect of the precepts and in respect of the Dhamma also, of course. Whether you are seeing things correctly or not, whether you are doing it the right way, whether you have broken your precepts or not. So all these can give rise to restlessness and worry if you are not learned or knowledgeable. Sometimes it's based on our misperceptions and misunderstandings of how things should be that give rise to restlessness and worry. So if you're not learned or knowledgeable, then you should clarify by questioning a teacher or a senior practitioner who has more experience than you. This is skillfulness in the Vinaya. It refers particularly to monks, and of course for lay people this refers also to understanding the factors that are responsible for breaking any of the precepts. There are certain factors involved. Actually, it's been broken up, and if you can analyze it accurately, then you can be sure whether you have broken a precept or not. And then of course associating with seniors, not any senior, but someone who is more experienced and well-practiced senior, and that person's vibes could actually have influence on you. People who are by nature well-developed spiritually, when you get near them, even though they don't say anything, you can feel the vibes. You can feel the calmness surrounding them. You can feel their loving kindness, their compassion, and that will definitely influence your mindset and your attitude too. The last two are common to all of them: good spiritual friendship and suitable conversation. And finally, for doubts, same. For doubts also, a lot of doubts come about because of misunderstandings or misinterpretations of the Dhamma and the discipline. Again, this can be resolved by questioning your teacher or somebody who is more experienced. The first three are actually the same as the previous one. And the fourth is to have more faith and confidence. If you're an intellectual and you're a skeptic, there are many things for you to be skeptical about, because there are many things that cannot be proven in Buddhism, in our Buddhist Dhamma. How can you prove whether there is a past life? How can you prove whether every intention will give rise to a karmic result? There's no way. No way you can prove that. But you just need to have more faith in these things. This faith could be based on inference. Maybe you have seen some YouTube videos about children or people who could spontaneously recall their past lives, and this could be verified. Or people who come back from past life regression hypnosis, they tell about their stories. Or children who could spontaneously remember their past lives, and then whatever experiences they had could be verified by going to the scene of their past life. So all these, you could have believe in that and infer that this could also apply to you and to everybody else, although it's not necessarily so. But faith and confidence is important. If we talk about the 5 spiritual faculties, the first one is faith. If you don't have enough faith, then you will not be able to embark on the spiritual path. Have the faith first, then you verify that faith through experiential practice. It's just like scientists. Scientists also have a preliminary hypothesis, and then they will do a series of experiments to see whether that hypothesis is true or not. And finally, when they find that it is true, then they will come out with a theory. So in the same way, we accept on faith first some things, and then we can verify in our practice. I've talked about the law of cause and effect in the worldly and spiritual sense, and what can be verified and what cannot be verified before in some of my other talks. Finally, 5 and 6 are the same: good spiritual friendship and suitable conversation. So now we go back to the suttas. In Nīvarana Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Ninth, Sutta 64. Here it talks about how to abandon the hindrances. Very simple. If all those things given by the commentaries are rather complicated for you, you just have to practice the 4 establishments of mindfulness. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in the 4th establishment of mindfulness, repeated observation of Dhammas, the first exercise is on the 5 hindrances, where you observe how the 5 hindrances arise, observe the causes for how they arise, the causes for how to abandon them, and the causes of how they would not arise again in the future. But that's only in the 4th establishment of mindfulness. That means it's only in one establishment of mindfulness, only one exercise in the 4th. But here in Nīvarana Sutta, this says that you practice all the 4 establishments of mindfulness to abandon the hindrances. Yeah, so it's not necessarily limited only to the 4th establishment of mindfulness. You can practice all of them. For example, to abandon the hindrance of sensual desire, you could repeatedly observe the body in terms of the elements, that if you close your eyes and you try to be mindful of what the body can be conscious of, then what is there? There are only sensations, right? Sensations and sounds and so forth. And all these will combine to give you a concept of a person sitting down there. Even the act of sitting itself is a concept that is made up by the mind. In the sense of ultimate reality, there are only sensations. Sensations in various proportions, in various combinations, in various positions that tell you that you're sitting instead of lying down or standing or walking. Okay, so you could have a repeated observation of the body, feelings, mental states, or the dhammas according to the situation to abandon the hindrances. Okay, now that I've talked about the 5 hindrances in the context of meditation, now let's talk about the hindrances in life. And this is based on one sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya called the Paṭṭhakkama Sutta. Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Force, Sutta number 61, Worthy Deeds. I've actually given a talk on this many years ago, and it's in one of my collections. It was published in a CD in the past and then in the DVD, but now it's available in SoundCloud. So in this sutta, the Buddha was telling Anatta Pindika, who came to see him, and the Buddha said that there are 4 things that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and rarely gained in the world. Everybody is looking for all these 4 things. And what are they? The first one is to have righteous wealth. Everybody wants to be wealthy. Secondly, everybody wants to have fame. Thirdly, everybody wants to have long life. Of course, a quality long life. Not just a long life, bedridden like a vegetable. A quality long life. And finally, have rebirth in a good destination. These are the things that the majority of people in the world are looking for. This is common to every being. You could say to every sentient being. Maybe not to animals, they don't look for fame, I guess, but they still want to have dominion. The monkeys will fight over dominance over a particular territory. That is because they want to have the food for themselves. So they are fighting over territories just like we humans fight over territories. Okay, so the Buddha says that in order for these 4 things to be attained, then there are 4 things that can be done. And what are these 4 things? First, you have faith in the Buddha's awakening. Having faith in the Buddha's awakening also implies that you have faith in the Buddha's teachings, correct? And also, of course, in the Sangha, who were the ones who preserved and transmitted the teachings from the Buddha's time until now. And of course, they also practice the teachings. So you have faith in the Buddha's awakening implies also that you have faith in the Buddha's Dhamma and the Buddha's Sangha. Then, because you have faith in the Dhamma, and the Dhamma tells you about sila, samadhi, panya, or dana bhavana, morality or precepts, and then generosity, and finally bhavana for developing the mind in some ways. So when you hear that, since you have faith in the Buddha and the Buddha's Dhamma, then you try to observe the precepts, because the Buddha also talks a lot of karma, and then good karma and bad karma, and therefore, in order not to fall into the woeful realms, you have to be virtuous in your conduct. Your morality, your virtuous conduct, will determine your realm of existence, where you will be born. If you have good conduct, you will be born in a good realm of existence, or rather, the chances of being reborn in a good realm of existence, like human beings or the devas, is higher. If your conduct is not virtuous, then the chances of going down to the woeful realms, becoming a hungry ghost, becoming an animal, or going down to hell itself are higher. And of course, we are not perfect. We have both virtuous conduct and vices as well. We have broken the precepts before we came into contact with Buddhism when we were younger. And even after we have come into contact with Buddhism, we still sometimes break the precepts. So we have done good and bad, and these will give their results accordingly. So if you have done more good deeds, more virtuous deeds rather, in terms of the sila, then this will increase your chances of getting rebirth in a good realm. Your virtuous conduct will also help you to be successful in life. Virtuous conduct also, for example, if you do not take life, then that will mean that you have a long life. If you tend to harm other beings, then your life will be full of suffering, a lot of illnesses and aches and pains here and there. On the other hand, if you are a very compassionate person, very kind to animals and other beings, then your life would be free from that, free from all the sufferings, illnesses and pains and aches and so forth. Generosity, on the other hand, will determine the quality of your life after you get reborn. So, say you don't have virtuous conduct, but you're very generous. Like there are some very wealthy people who got rich because of illegal means, drug trafficking, human trafficking, doing all sorts of unwholesome deeds to get rich. But they are also Buddhists. They believe in the law of karma, and they also do a lot of donations. They sponsor katina, they build and donate pagodas and monasteries and give to the Sangha. They are generous, but their sila is not pure. Because of their misconduct, they could be reborn as an animal. But because of their generosity, they could be reborn as the animal of a wealthy person, like a millionaire's pet dog or a millionaire's pet cat. Yeah, they live a luxurious life, more luxurious than the poor people in Africa or India. And then wisdom. So these are the 4 things that will lead to obtaining these 4 desirable things that we talked about. Now, where do the 5 hindrances fit in these 4? It comes under wisdom. So what is accomplishment of wisdom? Well, first of all, you understand that if one dwells with a heart overcome by an appropriate greed, then you would do those things that you should avoid, and you would neglect your duty, and that would affect your success in life. Okay, now the first one is inappropriate greed, which is the worldly form of sensual desire as a hindrance in meditation. In sensual desire as a hindrance for meditation, this refers to any sort of desire related to pleasures of the five senses. But here, inappropriate greed means that there is appropriate greed, right? Not by definition. So what is appropriate greed? Appropriate greed is, as a layperson, you are of course driven by greed or desire. You want to buy new clothes, you want to buy cosmetics, yeah, you want to buy nice ornaments for yourself, for your body, for your spouse, you want to eat good things, and so forth. All these are also greed, but they are not inappropriate as long as you don't break your precepts by pursuing them, and you don't hurt yourself or others in the sense of depleting your family's finances, and the finances should be channeled elsewhere, which is more important. And also harming yourself in terms of eating or getting things which are harmful to your health or harmful to other people's health. All right, so that's inappropriate greed. And this also happens with ill will and all the other five hindrances. So if one is overcome by any of these things, then this will of course affect the efficiency of your work, right? If you have doubt about the nature of your work, about your JD, about how things should be done, if you are restless, you cannot focus on your job, your project. If you are lazy also, if you are sloth and torpor also, you cannot do your work properly. If you have ill will, also your relationship with your colleagues, with your boss also will suffer, and that will affect not only your health, not only your long life, but also your wealth, your salary, your earnings. So these five hindrances, if they overwhelm a person who is not meditating but just trying to be successful in life, will also obstruct that person from gaining these four things that everybody wants, right? Wealth, fame, long life, and rebirth in a good realm of existence. So you should understand all these things, that when one is overcome by these five hindrances in one's daily living, then what will happen? Then all these things that will jeopardize the success of your life will happen. All right? So you have to understand that these are defilement of the mind, and they should be abandoned because they obstruct your success in life. And when all these things that you understand are a defilement of the mind, you abandon them, then of course you will be able to get all these things. You will get righteous wealth, you will get fame, you will get long life, and then you will get rebirth in a good destination. Okay, so I think I will end the talk here. If you need any clarifications, please feel free to ask.
Bante, I read somewhere that said not to send mettā to the opposite sex. Does this sound correct? Sadhu.
Well, this is according to the Visuddhimagga. When you are focusing on a particular person to radiate mettā in order to get the absorption jhanas. And there's some truth in that, because our brains are wired in such a way that we tend to be attracted by the opposite sex. And especially if you are young and your hormones are still very active, then if you focus your attention on a particular person of the opposite sex, then that could be a condition for arousing lust, which is the opposite of mettā. On the other hand, if you don't just focus on one particular member of the opposite sex, but to many different people, not just one, because in the Visuddhimagga, that sort of practice is to just focus on one particular person for a long time in order to evoke the feeling of mettā. So instead of just doing it on one person, you can move around from different persons. Members of the same sex, members of the opposite sex, you move around. So in that way, it will lessen the chances of arousing of lust. Okay, so particularly is for something, your parent of the opposite sex who has passed away or who is in danger in some health situation, some health crisis, you can send mettā to him or her if you are sure that this will not arouse any sensual or sexual desire. Okay, hope that answers the question.
Right. Thank you, Bante. Next question is by Wei Min Tan. Bante, may I ask how to overcome the challenge when the hindrances arise not from within, but influence from the outside? Example, political instability, rise of cost of living, natural disasters.
Yeah, all these are external factors, but what the hindrances don't happen outside. The hindrances happen inside. It is your reaction to these things. So how to cope with your reaction to these things? That's the issue. Not what's happening outside, because most of the times, many of the things are beyond our control. So instead of entertaining all these unwholesome reactions towards them, you could accept that these are also products and causes and conditions, and you have to figure out the best way to resolve these problems in a wholesome way.
Bante, is it recommended for someone with OCD to practice meditation? Sometimes I manage to observe the intrusive thoughts and let it pass. Sometimes it gets so overwhelming that I avoid them as I am afraid I create more bad karma due to the thoughts. Thank you, Bante, for your explanation.
Of course, it is good to practice meditation, but not the focused mindfulness meditation. Because if you have OCD and you practice focused mindfulness meditation, that will aggravate the situation. So it's best to practice open mindfulness meditation. And when you have this obsessive thought that arises, then you practice Āhāra anchor, free and easy touch and go, try to come back to the senses instead of indulging in them. Yeah, Āhāra anchor is actually all about that, not following what you like, not rejecting what you don't like, nor to ignore, but to just be mindful or aware, acknowledge that it's there, and then you come back to your senses. Okay?
All right, next question by Sim Ling Ong. Bante, can you please clarify, during open awareness to gaze beyond the wall but do not imagine, how does one do that? Sadhu.
You gaze beyond the wall, and so you are aware of colors in front of you, right? So you just be aware of colors, and then ask yourself, what else can the mind be aware of? And then the mind will move on to maybe sounds or sensations in the body, and let it move among the senses. Then if it is mindful of colors, and then spontaneously recognition arises, or memory arises, or a thought arises, also be mindful of that, and then practice Āhāra anchor. Don't reject, don't follow, don't ignore, come back to the senses.
And keep game.
Yeah.
May I ask, when we say that we accept all things and don't reject and don't follow, but before we sleep, usually at night, there will be like mind proliferating, is it? A lot of thoughts will come in. So if we let these thoughts stay in our mind, then we will have sleepless night. So what happens is, can we like put in effort and stop ourselves from indulging into this thought? Is it that we are forcing or not accepting whatever come to us?
You see, if you are forcing or pushing them away, that is rejecting, right? And then if you indulge in them, that's following. And then if you ignore them, that's ignorance. So what you do is you are mindful of them, you know that they are there, you acknowledge that they are there, but then you come back to your senses. Be aware of your sleeping posture, you know, your pajamas touching your skin, and then your back lying on the bed. Be aware of the sounds around you. You can be aware of all these things, and most importantly, be relaxed. There is a difference between rejection and acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean that you are indulging in them. Acceptance, you accept that they have already risen, right? If you reject them, then you try to push them away. You don't do that. You just acknowledge that they are there, and then you change the object to a sound or to a sensation in the body or whatever. Okay?
Bhante, may I know, is it advisable to change meditation object for beginner?
Well, you have to start somewhere. I would usually advise people to start off with open mindfulness meditation. And then later on, when they are established, if they want to, they can move on to focused mindfulness meditation. Because if you start off with a focused mindfulness practice, it is very difficult to switch to open mindfulness. You tend to get stuck there for a long time because of attachment to the peace and calm of staying with one single object. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next question is by John Lim. Bhante, how to cultivate faith on Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha?
Well, actually, the best way is to have experientially verified faith. When you practice the Dhamma and you see that you can actually experience for yourself cause, condition, and effect in respect of the subject. The subject here meaning your mind that is responding or reacting to the environment around you. The 6 senses, not just the 5, but mind responding to the 5 senses as well as to itself. When memories arise, when thoughts arise, how is the mind responding? And look at this response, these reactions as a product of causes and conditions. If your mind is composed enough, especially when the thoughts are spaced apart, you will be able to see that there are certain causes and conditions behind these thoughts that arise, these responses, reactions, and so forth. So if you understand them in terms of cause, condition, and effect, this is something experiential verification that will deepen your faith in the Buddha's teachings. That is the best. Otherwise, you can read a lot, read the suttas or read accounts of people who have had experiences that corroborate the Buddha's teachings. And this can also give you faith.
Thank you, Bhante. Next question by Yo. May I know what is open-minded meditation? Thank you.
No, I have never heard of open-minded meditation. Open mindfulness meditation, yes, but not open-minded meditation. That's a new word for me.
Yo, if what you mean is open mindfulness.
Yeah, I guess that's what you mean, open mindfulness. Well, open mindfulness is opening up your mindfulness to whatever is happening in your senses. Initially, the 5 senses, and then later, the 6th sense as well. As opposed to focused mindfulness, which is just focusing on one single object, like the breath at the nostrils or the rising and falling at the abdomen. Or even doing mettā. You're just sending mettā, that's also a focused mindfulness practice.
Okay, Hema, how? If someone expressed their feeling towards us, for example, you are cold and aloof to me, is it a suitable conversation between spiritual friends?
Well, it depends. It is the other person's perception. The other person has a right to perceive things he or she wants to. But instead of being defensive, you could ask why. Why do you say that I'm such? And try to understand, how your behavior has given rise to such a perception. And then see whether it's appropriate to rectify your behavior. And not to please people, but so that people don't have unwholesome perceptions about you.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Next question by Lilian Lim. Can open mindfulness meditation be practiced in a noisy or busy place?
Certainly, yes, that is an ideal place to practice open mindfulness because they will keep you in the present, provided you don't get caught up in the noise. Like, for example, people speaking a language that you understand. If you are staying in a place where you don't understand what people are saying, that's pretty easy, you know, it's just noise. But then if you understand what people say, then there's a tendency for you to, you know, get caught up by the conversation. But still, since it doesn't really directly involve you, you can just observe, let go, just be aware. Yeah, be mindful of whatever is happening around you. Move on. Actually, in an open place where there are a lot of people, it's also very interesting to practice focused open mindfulness. Because you focus and you practice focused open mindfulness, which means to say you focus on different objects. And then when you focus, there's a tendency for you to start to proliferate on that person that you see, the character of the person, and then the impressions you have, the comments you have on the person, on how people are conversing, and so forth. So on the other hand, if you practice defocused open mindfulness, then these are just blur images that are happening. Yeah, they just come and go. And you just see your mind's reaction to them. Sometimes you're interested, then you want to focus and see. Sometimes you're not interested, you just move on. Okay?
Thank you, Bhante. Right, next question, Hema Hao. Sorry, can I ask a question not in today's topic? If yes, then I would like to understand what is the difference between sati sampajañña and insight vipassanā practice.
No, can't ask now. That will be another lecture by itself. You can actually watch that in one of my videos in YouTube or listen to one of my repeat talks in SoundCloud. I've explained it there.
Can BARR Test, BARR Test, and inclining the mind to verify the causes and conditions and 5 aggregates simultaneously? Seems like one is intellectual, the other is intuitive.
Now, I've often said that if you really want to observe the 5 aggregates, you have to go to the 3rd level of composure attainable through open mindfulness practice. The 1st level is when the mind is very restless, but yet you are not caught up in those restlessness. You don't try to push the restlessness away. You are not dragged by them. You are just able to sit back and observe them come and go objectively, right? In a composed manner. So that is the 1st level of composure, whereby you can actually verify the 3 characteristics. Everything is changing all the time, impermanent. It's suffering. You don't want restlessness, but it's happening all the same. Anatta, you've got no control over it. So you can see the 3 characteristics very clearly if your mind is composed. Most people are not in that state. Most people try to fight with restlessness. And so they don't see that. All right, if you are able to practice Āhāra Anchor and you're able to step back, you can see restlessness as just another state of mind that is going on. So that is the 1st level of composure. The 2nd level of composure is when you watch this restlessness and you're willing to accept them without trying to push them away, they will eventually peter out. They will eventually become less and less and less, and there will be gaps in between those thoughts. That is the 2nd level of composure. And that's a time when you can see cause, condition, and effect in respect to the thoughts. How did this thought arise? There is a present circumstances, which are the causes, and there are past experiences, which are the conditions for influencing this thought to arise, which is an effect. That's how you see that. Now, the 3rd level of composure is when there are no more thoughts. You are just in a space of just being conscious of things happening, but there are no interpretations of what is happening at the senses. There are no memories, there are no comments, nothing. Just consciousness, mindfulness of what's happening. Okay, at that time, then you can really watch the 5 aggregates in the ultimate sense. Right? Form is just form, just sensations or colors or just sound, without naming those sounds, without recognizing those sounds or those colors. Or you could recognize them, but you don't proliferate on them. That's the first aggregate. The second aggregate is feelings. Yeah, feelings are either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Then there is sañña, or perception or memory. That is spontaneous recognition of things. Yeah, there can be spontaneous recognition of things, but there is no proliferation of what is recognized. Then there's sankhara. Sankhara is the intention that goes on in the mind, the urge of wanting to direct your attention to see feelings, to be conscious of or to be mindful of sounds, to be mindful of certain sensations, and so forth. That intention, that urge of directing the mind, that is sankhara. And finally, there's consciousness. Consciousness is just the state of being conscious. Although there are no more discursive thinking, there is still a sense of being conscious of what's happening. So that is consciousness, right? So that is the time when you can really see the five aggregates, when there are no more discursive thinking. So at that time, you don't apply the BARR test, because BARR test is conceptual. You apply the BARR test only in the second level of composure, and especially in your daily life, when you have to make decisions on whether to pursue a thought or intention or feeling or perception, or to curtail it. All right, hope that makes it clear.
Thank you, Bhante. Bhante, there's one hand raised by Yo LQ.
I just want to ask you, I'm confused now. You talk about open mindfulness meditation. How is it different from breath meditation? Well, I still don't catch your open mindfulness meditation. What is it actually?
Have you ever attended any of my retreats?
No.
No wonder you cannot understand.
Yeah.
Participated, how can you understand? You should join one retreat first, then you'll know what it's all about. Anyway, as I said just now, watching the breath is focused mindfulness practice, because you focus only on one object.
Okay. Then after the open mindfulness, that means focus on other object. You mean like the body scanning all, is it?
As I said, you must come and participate in my retreat first.
I see.
Just now, did you join the guided meditation at the beginning?
Yeah.
That's open mindfulness practice.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Sadhu.
Okay.
Sadhu. Thank you.
All right.
There is a question by Hema. How do we draw the line between suitable conversation and not suitable?
That is relative, depending on the individual's value system, depending also on context. So it depends on the context and the situation and circumstances. You have to use your discretion to decide whether it's suitable, because it could be suitable in terms of for your family. It depends on the role that you are playing, whether you are playing the role of a mother or a child or a teacher or a student or a businessman or a client, a government officer, or a public servant, whatever. All this depends on the role that you're playing. So from the spiritual sense of view, suitable conversation means anything that is related to the spiritual path. Anything that is not related to the spiritual path is not suitable. Yeah, but you are not a full-time yogi. If you're a layperson, you have to modify your behavior according to the role that you are playing. You cannot act like a yogi when you are in the world. There's a different set of values. So when in the world, you have to interact with people and you have to decide what is suitable for you in terms of the role that you have to play and the circumstances that you're in. Okay?
It seems like youngsters are expert in defocused mindfulness. For example, they can choose whether to listen or ignore their elder or teacher when talking to them. What is your opinion about this? Is this also a form of defocused mindfulness?
I don't think so. I think it's just a deliberate act of defiance, maybe. They're just not interested. I mean, this is nothing to do with spiritual practice. It's just an attitude of theirs. Because what can you do when your parent nags at you? You can't answer back, so you just ignore them if you don't want to listen.
Okay, thank you, Bante. So let's pay respects to Bante. Thank you, Bante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.